Welcome. It's great to have you here for this meditation and Dharma talk. My name is Jonathan Foust, and this is a really wonderful time to slow down, turn your attention inward, and hopefully renew a little bit. So thank you for making the time to be here. A few thank yous before we launch in. First of all, I want to thank our mindful movement teacher for today. Also, a big thank you to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for producing this evening. And as well, a big thank you to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy, who offer mindful dialogue after this session. If you're interested in the whole Monday night smorgasbord experience, you can start off at 6:30 with mindful movement led by a wonderful teacher, and then right into this meditation and Dharma talk. And then afterward, if you like to connect with other people and share about your practice and hear from others and look for inspiration, then please do join the Mindful Dialogue group that's happening a couple minutes after this talk. And to get those links, you can go to my website, you can go to my Facebook page, and you'll get the Zoom links that'll take you where you need to go. As well, a thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this class and all they do in the world. To my friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, where we met for many a year before we didn't, and we're here online. Just to let you know, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, you can sign up. I do have a weekly update regarding this class, and I have a monthly newsletter that goes out with kind of a review of what we covered, and I inflict my photography and sometimes video on you. As well, just to let you know that these classes are offered in the spirit of dana, or generosity. So I receive no direct compensation for this. I do this because I love it. Also, I do this because I don't want anyone to not get access to these practices and teachings. And the beautiful thing about this practice is your support and your generosity helps me do it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, the talks are online. All my talks are online, so you can find more at my website. And just a big welcome to everyone around the planet who's here for some practice. We're going to start off. Oh, quick reminder. I am doing a day-long retreat coming up, and it's an experiential inquiry into the nature of no self. This whole idea of no self is one of the characteristics of reality. It's really hard to grasp it. You can't really even grasp it with your mind. The only way you can grasp it is sort of experientially and through inquiry. So check my site or check my Facebook page if you'd like to have an adventure into that. It's a fascinating topic, and it's a whole area that I really, really enjoy. Looking at the whole idea of who are you really, beyond the conditioning, what's there. So all that being said, here we are for some time of meditation. And you might like to close your eyes. And first of all, make sure that you're not going to be disturbed. It's helpful to put your cell phone on stun, close the door, and check your posture if you like. Just take a sense of where might you make some little adjustments in your posture. And in fact, you might even like to reach your arms up overhead. Just stretch up, reach up to the left side and the right side. Open your jaw wide. You can let any sounds since you're on mute. And there are two areas that I find helpful for myself, two main areas when I'm settling into meditation. And one is just sort of sensing the pelvis. So ideally, you want to be sitting in a way that you can be alert and relaxed. So a slight forward tilt of the pelvis brings a natural kind of like a C curve into your low back, and you might get a little more of a sense of your sternum floating above your navel. Often I will jam a pillow down there to kind of make me a little more upright. The second area, and you might bring your attention right now to the occipital ridge, right to the base of the skull. And also just to sense the back of the neck. And just for a few moments, hold your attention there. And imagine that you could relax this part. Just relax and soften through the base of the skull, the back of the neck. And now imagine a very gentle lengthening. And in that lengthening, you're not only letting go of some tension points, but as you imagine a lengthening through the back of the neck, you'll feel your chin a little more parallel to the floor. And with your eyes closed, you might also sense two other areas that I find helpful. One is to just let your awareness flood into the soles of the feet and the heels. And just feel this. Feel the backs of the hands, the palms and fingers and thumbs, feeling the volume or the space inside the hands. And allow this to be a time of moving from focus on the outer world to more awareness on the inner world. There are a few things that can help to set the stage for meditation. And one of them is your breath. And you might just now take 3 slow, smooth, and full deep breaths. Notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And we'll also do a little bit of a body scan as a way of grounding awareness more in the here and now in the felt sense. So you might imagine your forehead smooth. And as you sense the crown of the head and the scalp, just notice any sensations here, any tingling or subtle sensations. Could you relax or soften the little muscles around your eyes? And can you feel or imagine your face softening? All the little micro expressions of your face beginning to melt and soften. Can you sense the gap between your upper teeth and your lower teeth? And can you imagine that gap opening a little bit as you soften your jaw, letting your jaw hang from the skull? Could you soften or relax and feel the volume of your lips? Could you relax and soften and feel the volume of your tongue? Is it possible to relax the root of your tongue down into your throat? Feeling the back of the head and the base of the skull. The back of the neck and the tops of the shoulders. can you feel the volume of your shoulders and shoulder blades? And sensing now the weight of your arms. Imagine the arms like heavy drapes as you sense down through the elbows, down through the wrists. And the backs of the hands, and as if you could sense from the inside the palms, fingers, and thumbs. Feel the heart and the lungs. The lower back and the buttocks. And how low and deep in the belly can you now feel the breath as you soften and relax? And sensing the lower abdomen. The floor of the pelvis. And feeling the weight and the volume of your legs as you sense from the hip joints down through the knees. And the backs of the knees, the kneecaps. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. The soles of the feet and the heels. How intimately can you feel this sense of deep relaxation? And noticing at the same time this quality of alertness. And you might now gently direct your attention toward an anchor, perhaps the breath, the movement of the breath on the inside, or perhaps the sounds around you as they're happening, or perhaps the sense of aliveness in the palms and fingers and thumbs. whatever anchor you choose for this meditation. For this next period of time, let this be your primary practice of concentration. Deeply relaxed, at the same time exploring this moment-to-moment awareness here at the point of contact with your anchor. And knowing the natural movement of the mind is to move away. But when you notice the mind lost in thought, gently guide your attention back to the experience of here and now. When you notice your mind has wandered into the past or the future, take your time to re-arrive. Let this be a sense of coming home. What could relax or soften inside right now? If your anchor is on the breath, you might just sense how intimately you can feel the next 3 breaths on the inside. How awake can you be to the sounds that are happening all around you, all by themselves? And if you soften and feel the space inside the hands, the palms and thumbs, how intimately can you sense the subtlety of pulse or tingling or vibration or subtle energy? Relaxed and at the same time alert. You may notice as well a heightened awareness of what lies beyond your point of concentration or anchor, the awareness of everything that is changing. And if it feels right for you, you might, if you like, widen and broaden your attention, and sensing this seat of the witness, of your capacity to observe through this lens of non-judging awareness. And again, when the mind is utterly lost, begin again, relax, arrive at your anchor. And then, if it feels right for you, broaden, widen your awareness. Awake to all that is happening and exploring what it means to let things be as they are. In these remaining minutes or so, you might again refresh the practice and sensing from the inside the soles of the feet and the heels, and could you soften, relax, and feel the lower back and the buttocks, and the floor of the pelvis, and sense how intimately you can feel the breath down deep in the belly. And the backs of the hands, the palms and fingers and thumbs. Relaxing the tongue, the lips, the inside of the mouth, and the jaw. And deeply relaxed, at the same time alert. And sensing the breath or sound, the felt sense in the palms, just receiving the sensations as they're happening. And sensing this seat of the witness, this quality of non-judging awareness as you open and widen your attention to note all that is changing. And you might, in these remaining minutes, explore what it's like to soften any sense of concentration or doing, and relax and open into the sense of being, resting in presence, allowing all things to be exactly as they are. Awake to the senses, awake to the movement of the mind, and exploring this question. What could relax or soften or let go right now? What could relax or soften or let go even more than that? And you might now let go of all technique. Relax and feel and let be. You might now, as you're ready, take 3 very slow, smooth breaths. Where do you feel the breath on the inside right now? Notice all the sounds around you, 360 degrees. Feel any sense of aliveness in the palms and fingers and thumbs. And as you're ready, with your eyes closed, let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right, sensing the movement from the inside. Take some time to stretch and move. How does your body want to move right now? You might like to reach your arms up overhead. You might like to lean back and rest for a few moments, listening deeply to what your body is wanting right now. Welcome. I'm very glad to have this time with you. I'd like to share kind of a fantastical story. It's one of my very favorite stories. I only pull this one out every now and then because I think it illustrates all what I'd like to share with you in this talk. For many, many years, I was involved in a very kind of rigorous form of breathing, of breath work, somewhat informed by rebirthing, a lot of the early work by Leonard Orr. And in this technique, you breathe in a particular pattern and you relax while you're getting more and more active. And it's phenomenal what people can experience over the course of an hour of this intensive form of breathing and relaxing. I've led an intensive couple times a year for about 20 years. And there's one particular story of this breath work that just blows my mind. It's the story of this wonderful guy. I don't even know his English name, but his name was Jai Dayal, older fellow. And Jai Dayal, if you're out there, hello, what a wonderful dude you are. He was passionate about leading programs for kids, so he would do this breath work with kids. And there are different ways you can do the breath work, and I'm going to spare you those details. But there was a woman who said, I wonder if you could maybe do a session with my 7-year-old son. He wakes up from time to time with these terrible nightmares that he's being attacked, he's being mugged by someone with a knife. And Jai Dayal said, sure, I'd be happy to, but is there anything you know about any trauma in his life? Was there maybe any trauma at birth? And she said, well, he was born breech, and so it was an emergency cesarean, and I was pretty drugged through it, but it was a little hairy there for a while. So he's doing this breath work with this little guy, and this little guy keeps falling asleep and falling asleep and falling asleep, and his legs were kind of curled up toward his chest, and then suddenly his legs shot out straight, and he sat up and he looked at me and he said, the knife missed me by that much. Total recall of the emergency cesarean. That's a fantastical story, and it's true. But it points to a really interesting point I would like to share and open up a little bit. And this is a phrase you've probably heard before. Your issues are in your tissues. Everything you've experienced in life is part of your memory, but it's also part of your somatic memory. I've been talking a little bit about thoughts on self-healing, and I'd like to talk tonight about number one, self-awareness and self-diagnosis, particularly when it comes to undigested experiences in your life. Two, I'd like to talk about the power of recognizing fear and helplessness or trauma in your life experience, and then how to work with it. And finally, how to support others you recognize in some way maybe experiencing some form of trauma or some form of fear and helplessness, or certainly going through so much right now, and it's registering in very, very powerful and potent ways for many, many people. So this exploration of healing fear, helplessness, trauma, I think could be really helpful. It's been certainly helpful for me. So the different forms of trauma, but I kind of had a first-hand account with one particular form of trauma, and this was my dad. My dad never said a word about his experiences in World War II. He was a college professor, he was witty, he was funny. As far as I could tell, he had no enemies. Everyone seemed to really like my dad. He was what's called a convinced friend. He became a Quaker. He joined the Quakers He was very active in our Quaker meeting in Pennsylvania. He was clerk at the meeting and very, very engaged. He became a draft counselor during the Vietnam War to kind of advise people around alternatives to serving in the war. And one of the few times I ever saw him angry was when he heard someone say that World War II was a good war. And he was livid, saying something to the effect of, anyone who says that is a blankety blankety blank bastard who never got out of the PX. And the PX is where you get your supplies. I remember thinking as a kid, what was that all about? I'd never seen my dad so angry. And then one day, the story just was released. Living in the community where I lived, my dad came to take a program, and he did a retreat with a lot of yoga, meditation, things like that. And one night, he just started to tell me all the stories of his experience in World War II. He was drafted 18 and shipped right into Anzio in Italy. So front lines, he was wounded in Anzio, and then he was patched up, and then he was put right back in, and he was part of the invasion of southern France with the pincer move toward Germany. So moving very, very fast, and lots of booby traps and demolition and resistance fighting, at random on the way. And then he was part of the first wave of boats crossing the Rhine River, where at 2 o'clock in the morning, 25 guys in his boat, no one with life preservers or anything, just took off to the other side of the shore, and his boat took a direct hit from a mortar, and he was found 7 miles downstream. He found helmets that were floating in the water and turned them upside down and interlaced his fingers, and the only survivor. He was then patched up again, and then before he was shipped back at the end of the war, he was posted right after it was liberated at the Buchenwald concentration camp. One of the things, as he talked to me that night, just story after story after story of friends he knew, friends he made who were killed, his medals for days of sustained combat without reinforcement. He said the most painful thing for him was when he came back and he hitchhiked home, how nonplussed his family was. They were happy to see him, but they asked no questions about his experience. And many, many years later, talking to my aunt, she told me how for a long period of time he would wake up not only his house, but he would wake up the neighborhood with his screams in the middle of the night. So he tried to work out his trauma through his writing. He wrote some really interesting plays about coming in contact with old enemies and conversation things like that. But this practice of slowing down, paying attention to what was arising inside, making room for it, feeling safe, suddenly brought all these memories to the surface. And ultimately, what really helped him the most was talking about it. As he started to share the stories, there was a conscious shift in his whole acumen. That's a pretty extreme trauma, but we all have, to some degree, some experiences of fear and helplessness. And fear and helplessness combined create trauma. There's acute trauma. This is like a single stressful or dangerous event in your life that's kind of encoded in your memory, in your body. And then there's chronic trauma, which is kind of repeated and prolonged exposure to highly stressful events. And then there's complex trauma, which is exposure to multiple traumatic events from different areas. So when you think about war, when you think about child abuse, when you think about domestic violence, when you think about sustained poverty and hunger, when you think about systemic racism, when you think about bullying, when you think about violence, disasters, early childhood experiences, domestic violence, medical trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, traumatic grief, we all have these undigested experiences. I'm not going to lead a reflection on your experiences of fear and helplessness because I don't necessarily want to get you too activated, but it's important to acknowledge it's there. It's all there. And so we're back to these two questions that I personally find very, very helpful in my meditation practice, particularly when something arises that I interpret as unpleasant. This can be strong physical unpleasantness, it can be a strong emotion, it can be a mental state. The first question is, so what is happening? Can I name it? This is wisdom. The second question, how does this want me to be with it? And this opens us up to loving presence or compassion. Last week I talked a little bit about how that inquiry, how does this want me to be with it, can help you determine whether it's time to lean into your experience of something unhealed or when it's time to lean back. When do you name it and make room for it and explore how to be with it? And when do you turn your attention elsewhere? When do you decide you're just going to watch a movie and eat popcorn? This process of self-awareness and self-diagnosis, it's the essence of the path, as far as I can tell. And no one can tell you. It's something that comes from your own experience. And sometimes we realize that maybe we could have leaned in a little bit deeper. And sometimes we realize maybe I was premature to try and take on this experience that arose. A woman I knew pretty well was getting familiar with these practices that can open up into greater healing, and primarily the practice of what we call RAIN, the R, to recognize what's presenting, that wisdom faculty. The A, to accept or allow, to ask, can I be with it? Which is opening up the loving presence, compassion element. And then investigation, the I, to really have tea with that, really look closely at the phenomena of it and how it arises inside. Not only how it feels, but the attitude in your mind, all of that. The N, to nourish what you discover with loving presence. And then finally, to sort of rest in presence, just to sort of be with that, the result of that journey through recognizing, allowing, investigating, and nourishing. And she wrote me an email, and she said something to the effect of, last night my boyfriend told me he was done and he wanted to move on from our relationship. I was really, really hurt and really kind of devastated, but I thought I would try to be with this experience, and I took in what he said. He told me I wasn't fun anymore, that he'd lost interest in our relationship, that there was someone else that he thought would be a better match for him. And so I started to investigate the felt sense, how it felt inside. But before I knew it, I was sobbing uncontrollably, and I had this horrible feeling that I'd never, ever be in a healthy relationship again in my life. I felt like such a failure. It was a terrible night, and I couldn't pull myself out of this morass of feeling I was such a failure and kind of unending pain. What do I do now? And maybe you can relate to that story. You start to look at something painful, and before you know it, you're just pulled into a vortex of negative, self-reinforcing thoughts. There's this Peanuts cartoon where Charlie Brown is lying on his back, and he says, "What's wrong with me?" And a little voice says, "This could take a long, long time." So there were a number of things as she was doing her investigation, a number of things she might have done differently. And chief among them was she kind of skipped the A in the rain part of that equation. Can I accept this? Can I allow this? Chances are, for her, the timing wasn't right. She was too activated. She might have been too tired. She might have been just too freshly wounded to be able to access mindfulness, to be able to access kind of non-judging awareness so that she could look closely at the event and how she was holding it and how ultimately she might find peace with it. And so the question becomes, when something arises, strong physical sensation, strong emotion, a strong mental state, what do you do if you can't be with it? And I find it so, so, so important in my practice, and certainly what I've observed with many people, is to really ask that question. When something arises that's between you and feeling happy or free, sincerely ask, can I be with it right now? And listen. And you may get a sense, and it may arise somatically, and it may arise from your body that might be, yeah, but go gently. Or it might be, yeah, I can be with this. Or it might be, no, I can't. You know, I like the question, how does this want me to be with it? Because that sort of opens up a little bit of a intuitive dialogue with what's going on. You know, when you're activated around something, you're activated. But what you can do when it feels like it's too much is let it know you see it. Let it know another time when the conditions are better. Your intention is to be there. But you might sense that you can't be with it. So what you might do is explore how you can turn your attention away. If you're really deep in meditation, you might shift your awareness away from the issue back to your breath or back to your anchor. But quite often, if it feels like it's too much, you're going to need to move your attention a little more dramatically. You might need to get up and move or have a cup of tea, or if you're feeling really, really activated around something, exercise, go for a walk, look for someone you feel safe with. Look for a way that you can practice self-care. Maybe it's time for the movie and the popcorn. But I find letting it know you see it, letting it know your intention is to be with it, and find another time. As I've talked about recently, you know, the idea of bracketing. I see you, I'm putting brackets around it. Another time when the conditions are different, I'm going to be with it. So as I've been thinking about this topic of working with fear and helplessness, working with trauma, it's impossible not to acknowledge all those who are suffering right now. These are such scary times. I don't need to make the list because we all know the list. But we're all looking for comfort. We're all looking for answers. And when we're in fear, when resources are scarce, we'll look for someone we can make wrong for our problems. And we're seeing that polarizing right now, and it's seriously activating, of course. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the process of working with fear and helplessness. And as I do so, I just want to say up front, I am not an expert in working with trauma. But I've had my own experience, and I've worked with others. So please take what I say with a grain of salt, and please, there are so many great resources. Check out the resources, because there are those whose their whole life is about working with these issues, and there are people out there who can offer some great guidance. But I was so struck by this story. Again, I think this kind of illustrates somewhat of how it works, of these teams of trauma therapists who just kind of who move around the planet to wherever there is trauma, and they volunteer their time to work with people who are right in the middle of traumatic events. And you may recall the tsunami in Southeast Asia, where it just wiped out so many people. And there was one woman who had lost her whole family. And the therapist, through a translator, asked two questions. And I'm not sure of the order of the questions. But one question was, when did you realize you were a survivor? And isn't that an interesting question? Because what happens is when we're traumatized, we identify as the victim because we're so overwhelmed by that fear and helplessness. And we're so taken over by the trauma response of either moving into fight, flight, or freeze. So when she was asked that question, when did you realize you were a survivor? She had to think and then recognize that she was a survivor. There was a moment when she realized, I'm not going to die. Whew. The second question, and again, you can imagine her trauma response, how activated her body was, that she was asked, well, so here's the shaking, and here's the shaking, here's the clench. Can you tell me where you don't feel it? And this becomes a very powerful question as well. Where don't you feel it? And as you get more somatically aware, when the conditions are there for you to investigate fear and helplessness, and it feels like you're not going to be activated or pulled away or re-traumatized, it becomes a very, very interesting question. And for many, it'll be the tip of the nose or the earlobes. There are actually fewer nerve endings. And as I work with people, it's quite surprising sometimes when someone's feeling a lot of fear, a lot of helplessness, and there's that question, where don't you feel it? Quite often they'll say, my earlobes. So and I know I've shared this before, but when I go to the dentist, which is not my favorite thing in the world, I focus on my hands. And I just remind myself, my hands feel fine right now. That panting is my dog. So a few things that you can do when you begin to feel fear and helplessness. The first thing is you're looking for grounding, because the mind is so overactive. It's just hypervigilant. So making contact with the here and now. Points of contact between your body and the chair or the ground. Sometimes touching or holding something gives you a here and now feeling. One technique when you're touched with fear and helplessness is to name 10 things that you're noticing or that you see. The lamp, the computer, I see the camera, I see the keyboard. And again, it's moving you into the here and now. So the next thing is to explore what are called resource anchors. Like, where can you place your attention that's going to be skillful? And that question of where don't I feel this can be so powerful. I'm back. Sensations arise and they are interpreted as neutral, pleasant, and unpleasant. When you're feeling fear and helplessness, naturally you're going to fixate on the unpleasant. So you sense, can I find any areas that feel neutral or maybe even pleasant right now? And that can become a very powerful resource anchor. Bringing your hands together. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll bring my fingertips together and I'll just focus there. Or you can bring your hand to your heart. Or as Tara likes to do, bring your hand to your cheek. But you might right now, in fact, let's do a little Zen pop quiz. If you close your eyes and just bring your hand to your heart and take 3 deep breaths. Relax on the out breath. And just feel that somatic impression of bringing your hand to your heart. Another resource you can do is to have a phrase that's helpful for you. Just to say, I'm okay, or it's okay right now, or may I be happy, may I be free, may this serve the awakening of my heart and my mind. And yet another resource anchor can be to think of someone that you love. Think of someone who really cares about you, and really have them as an anchor so you can sort of stream attention to that person. Or maybe it's a pet. And what you focus on becomes bigger. So the resource anchors, you're looking for somewhere to rest your attention when you feel super activated. Where don't I feel this? Look for the neutral, the pleasant sensations. Bring the fingertips together, or the hand to the heart, or to your cheek. A phrase that's meaningful for you. Or think of someone you know and someone you love. So that's grounding and resource anchors. And then what you can do is you can notice your breath. And you may notice how whenever you're under stress, your breath is compromised. You're not breathing fully. Whenever there is stress, it's going to show up in your breath. And if you can change your breath, you can change your state. Chances are, when you're feeling really relaxed and open, your breath is probably slow and full and deep. So all the science of breath and pranayama techniques, how you breathe directly impacts your state. So you can try coherence breathing, which is a kind of a modern name for an ancient technique of breathing that has been used for millennia as a way to shift your consciousness. And let's do a few moments of it right now. You can close your eyes. And you want to focus on your breath and breathe into the count of maybe 4 or 5 or even 6. At the top of the inhalation, exhale again. You're matching the length of the exhalation with the length of the inhalation. Now, as you're breathing, there's no pausing between the in-breath and the out-breath. You just flow right into it. And if you would now, take 3 breaths, slow, full, and deep. And now, if you would, release the breath. And just notice. What do you feel right now after just a minute of this technique? How you breathe directly impacts your state. So another thing you can do when you're feeling stressed and feeling that sense of fear and helplessness is the body scan. And what I find is when you're doing the body scan, there's certain key points that I find powerful for myself. And maybe we'll just do these real quick, again, experientially. Right now, could you imagine your face relaxing? All expression melting away from your face. Just feel that shift inside. If you relax your tongue in a way that it fills your lower jaw, what happens inside? Could you soften the belly? Can you feel the floor of the pelvis? The soles of the feet? Palms of the hands? Just take a moment. And again, you might take 3 slow, deep breaths and just feel what may have shifted just in these moments of consciously softening on the inside. And you may notice as you become more self-aware that there are areas that where you chronically hold tension. And they may become your go-to points. So just one or two areas inside, if you train yourself to consciously soften there, you may notice how it opens up kind of a systemic sense of relaxation. When I feel the soles of my feet in the heels, there's a kind of a relaxed grounding that occurs. When I feel the palms of my hands, I can feel the pulse and tingling, and it moves me from excessive thinking to a little bit of absorption into the here and now. Another thing you can do when you're feeling fear and helplessness is to use walking as a meditation practice, a walking meditation. There's a whole art to walking meditation, but there's one person in particular who I got to know very well, who would get so stressed that at times she would sort of disassociate. She would kind of move into the flight part of the practice. And it would happen at night. And she'd feel very alone, and there would be no one around and no one she could talk to. So walking meditation became her way of soothing herself. She would just walk in her bedroom, just lifting, moving, placing, feeling her feet on the floor. Walking meditation can be a wonderful way to create, again, a sense of absorption and a sense of calming. And finally, one thing you might explore, and there's so much to talk about in this and not enough time to do so, is to find someone you can work with. And this is maybe one of the most powerful things you can do, because when it comes to unwinding fear and helplessness, we so quickly lose our capacity for mindfulness, for non-judging awareness, and having someone who can be there to support you. And there's some beautiful, beautiful technologies that are now available that might support you here. Exploring how, as you can sort of resource yourself, find the ways to be present, where noticing where you don't feel it, that you can begin to explore kind of a gradual exposure to that traumatic event, where you can just sort of touch the edges and learn how to kind of back away. Having someone to support you can be super, super helpful. So these techniques of grounding, of creating resource anchors, of using breath and body scan, using walking, working with someone, are all about supporting you to become more self-aware and to recognize when you shouldn't lean in because you don't feel safe. Or maybe when you could lean in and begin to look a little closer at what's there. Safety is just so, so, so important. I wanted to say a little bit about not only the power of sensitizing yourself to the undigested experiences of fear and helplessness, but also sensitizing yourself to others. As we're kind of in a traumatized culture right now, it's super, super helpful. I was leading a retreat, a meditation retreat. This is many, many years ago, before I was really kind of as aware as I am now of the trauma we all carry. There was a woman in my retreat who would not close her eyes. And as the leader of this retreat, I was starting to get pretty annoyed with her, and I would kind of like stare her down from time to time. And then she would close her eyes again, but then they'd pop right open. She was very, very restless. She was very combative with me around what I was trying to communicate to the group, and was just such a handful. And I was very, very frustrated and angry with her. And then she told me what she did, that she was a psychiatric nurse in a prison. And suddenly I realized what she must be carrying inside. And I realized that meditation was not what she needed. That she needed to find some other venue to help her kind of work with all that she was holding on the inside. So noticing the signs of those around you who may be feeling fear, helpless, feeling traumatized can be helpful. To recognize that anger can oftentimes be a sign of some very, very deep unmet need. And certainly we all see this in our culture right now. Someone who's unresponsive, someone who doesn't kind of seem, just isn't fully there, can definitely be a sign of sort of the disassociation that can occur. If there's someone you know who has anxiety without relief, who's sort of caught in the hypervigilant state, strong, consistent emotional outbursts can be very, very healthy, but they can also be a sign that there's something going on. Someone who's depressed, who finds themselves kind of spinning down into kind of that sense of dark, heavy helplessness. Someone's having panic attacks when they're kind of like overwhelmed, certainly can be a sign. Recognizing trauma is about recognizing that there are people out there with very, very strong unmet needs and offering them resources, offering them compassion, helping them to find what they need can be super, super helpful. Now, the bad news is that there's a lot of trauma out there. The good news is that trauma can be healed over time. And what people notice who actively work on their trauma, they notice that the shame around their trauma begins to subside. As they begin to recognize the beliefs that they've formed around their traumatic event, quite often around unworthiness or helplessness, they notice that those beliefs start to kind of correct themselves. They begin to recognize, I was living under an assumption of a false belief. You can't make that happen, but you can create a field where that recognition can begin to arise from the inside. When someone realizes, this isn't my fault, wow, new possibilities begin to arise. People report when they can work with fear and helplessness through mindfulness that the memory or the memories are less triggering. And someone described going through a really horrible car crash. She said, I can talk about it now. I can actually describe what happened without being triggered. And so the beautiful guideline where someone said, like, part of the practice when you are working with a very unpleasant or traumatic memory is you'll know something has shifted when you can talk about it without being triggered. Many people report like a growing sense of mastery. Like, I was so overwhelmed by these issues in my life, and now I'm not. And that sense of accomplishment and mastery is a beautiful thing. There's more memory organization around the trauma, because quite often, again, when you are traumatized, your entire system shuts down for survival. And as you begin to deconstruct the trauma, you begin to remember it as it really happened, as opposed to quite often the fragmented memories, or some parts remember, some parts you don't. It becomes more clear in your awareness. And you begin to make more sense of it. You begin to be able to hold it in more of a space of deeper understanding. You know, the good news about meditation, as I often say, is you become more sensitive. And the bad news is that you become more sensitive. And as your practice continues to deepen, there's a very good chance that what lies ahead in your practice is this unearthing of the unseen and unfelt and undigested experiences in your life. And remembering these elements of the practice, your capacity to name what's there is wisdom, to see what's true. Your capacity to ask, how does this want me to be with it right now? What does this need right now? And then to deeply listen opens up your capacity for loving presence and for compassion. The more you practice, the more you begin to sense and develop the sense of actually kind of a verified faith of like, I trust that now's not the time. I see it. I get it. But not now. That can be such a skillful practice. And on the other side, to recognize, I have the firepower. I have access to non-judging awareness. I have enough presence to have tea with this, to look a little closer. And now I can begin to recognize that I can actually explore where I don't feel it and create that resource state inside where I can feel the edges, where I can get more familiar with this. And I can begin to hold this in a greater sense of the wise heart. This is all tricky and challenging stuff. But at the same time, I fully believe that when you practice with sincerity, you are inexorably moved to become more and more whole. You personally and for all of us on this journey together. Let's take just a few minutes for a short reflection. If you like, you can close your eyes. And you might take 3 slow and full deep breaths. Relax on the exhalation. And you might, if you like, bring your hand to your heart and just feel what it's like to offer this sense of self-care right now. And in these final moments, you might just sense not just your desire, but your willingness to feel more whole, to feel fully vibrant and fully alive. You might imagine your cup full and overflowing. And in your own way, you might take this time to wish yourself well on your journey. Imagine your journey filled with a greater sense of ease and guided by the wise heart. And imagine that well-wishing radiating out now in all directions to all beings without discrimination. May all beings feel at peace. May all beings in all directions feel free from stress and suffering. And as you offer it outward, again, imagine you can offer it inward to this breath, and to every cell of your body. As you're ready, you can very gently now lengthen and deepen your breath. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope this was helpful. May you feel whole and happy, and may you be there for those who can use your calm, your wisdom, and your heart. Thank you so much, and many blessings in your journey.